How's it going, everybody? Thank you for watching another video here on Knife Reviews 365. Today we're going to try to demystify one of the most confusing aspects of picking out a knife. We're talking about blade steel. Now, of course, one of the first things you should consider is what you're going to be using your knife for. If you want something for everyday carry that's very thin, maybe you want a folder like this. But of course, if you're looking for something outdoor to do more heavy duty work, you might want something like this. Now let's say, for example, you want a fixed blade. Maybe the next consideration would be considering what type of grip you want on that knife. Do you want something like this plastic grip that's cheaper but smoother and a little bit more slippery? Or do you want to pay a little bit more money and get something like this, which is a canvas micarta that has a really nice feel to it and gets really grippy when it's wet? And then, of course, if you decide to go with a Foley knife, you got to decide stuff like how large you want it to be, what type of opening mechanism you want to have, and then what type of locking mechanisms you have in there. That all can affect price. Now, once you got all of that easy stuff figured out, the most exciting but yet at the same time confusing thing about picking out a knife is what type of steel you want in that blade. Now, picking out a knife can be extremely intimidating when you go into a store, or maybe you're at Blade Show or SHOT Show, these really big trade shows, and there's thousands of knives in these fancy glass cases, and you hear people throwing out all these fancy terms. I promise you guys, all you have to know are about 4 to 5 different elements that go into steel making, and you can step up to those counters and have an intellectual conversation with those sales reps. Let's have a look. The 3 elements we're going to be looking at, starting off with these 2 right here, and that's iron and carbon. So both of these together and you get steel. Now, iron is always going to be somewhere in the high 90s, like 97, 98%. Some might even be 96%. But carbon is needed to harden the iron. Just like back in the day when they were messing around with copper and they're like, oh, the stuff is too soft, we need to add something. They discovered that if they added tin, you would get bronze. So now with these 2, it's the upgraded version, you get steel. So depending on how much carbon you add to iron is going to really dictate the use of the steel. And really the only other element we're going to be looking at is chromium, which gives an exceptional level of corrosion resistance to whatever steel you're adding it to. So depending on the percentage of this added to that, it may be considered a stainless or an alloy. Let's have a look. Now, instead of looking at the entire forest of knives, we're only going to be concentrating on these 4 trees in the forest, because these are the 4 types of steel that we really should be looking at most of the time. And that's carbon, alloy, stainless, and tool steels. Let's start off by having a look at what a carbon steel looks like and what a tool steel looks like. All right, so here we go. We got the high carbon steel on this side, which is 1095, and we got the tool steel on the right side, which is D2 steel. Now, pretty easy, carbon, high carbon stuff. If it's above, I would say 0.45%, it's going to be high carbon. So 1095 has like 0.90 to 1.0 carbon in it, so that's going to be high carbon. No chromium in here, so not very rust resistant. So for those people that have those survival knives, they keep them really clean or they coat them with something. But those type of knives with high carbon, they rust a lot. Now on the other side, look at the level of chromium in here. So 12% or maybe like 10, 11, 12% chromium. That's a lot in there. So it's going to be very resistant to rust. Corrosion resistance is great. But look at the level of carbon in here. So this is a very hard steel. So that's what you're going to see in tool steel. It has to be very corrosion resistant and very hard. Now the disadvantages of having a hard knife is it's good because the edge retention is really great, but because it's so hard, sometimes it can chip, and when it chips and it loses its edge, because it's so hard, it is ridiculously hard to sharpen, especially by hand. All right, let's have a look at some stainless and some alloy. So we got the 8CR14 MOV on this side, which is the newer version. The older one is 13, and we got 5160 on this side. Again, if you look at the chromium amount, it's 13 to 14% on the stainless, and we all know that stainless is extremely corrosion resistant. So if you live in a place like Hawaii or you're around water a lot, that's something that you want. And on the alloy side, just a lower level of chromium here, just 0.70. Now, an example of something like 8CR13 or 14 would be the Overland by CRKT. They absolutely love this steel. It's very easy to sharpen. The edge retention is great. Some people don't like it because it's from China, but OS 8 would be the Japanese version. And then Buck Knives. Buck Knives has their new Combat Knives series. This is made of 5160. This thing is going to be a great review. But those are just some quick example of knives that are made out of these 2. And again, if we just follow chromium and carbon, we can see what the steel is supposed to do. Well, alright guys, there you go. If you're trying to pick out a new knife, I hope that helps out. Remember, all you gotta do is remember 3 basic elements and then figure out what extra 2 they're trying to sprinkle in there, if anything at all. Guys, thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.